Hey, we're going to have a a segment now with Victoria Bogner, who's been a guest on our show
Number of times.
a number of times, and give us a bit of a client story. So, Vicky, thanks for taking some time to be with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and I call her Vicky because I consider her a friend, but she goes by Victoria. So I don't know what I'm supposed to call you on the podcast.
My friends call me Vicky, so you're doing
I'm calling
it
you
right.
Vicky. We're calling you Vicky.
I will have to call you Victoria. So,
And Vicky's out of our Kansas office.
yes. So
Yeah.
Yes.
share a
Good old
great
Lawrence, Kansas.
share a great story with us, please.
Yeah, okay. So this is something we actually see quite often, but this is a particular client. They come to us from California.
Have they moved from, just out of curiosity, did they move from California to Kansas?
No, they're California clients.
Okay. Oh, so Vicky, let's step back for a second. Tell us what role you play in the organization that you would have interaction with a client from California.
Sure. So I am the head of wealth planning. So I lead our advanced wealth planning team. It is a team of wealth planners, estate planners, tax planners, in which we come alongside the financial advisor, and we're the specialists that really dig into the complexity of some of these high net worth client cases. So we're working with clients all over the place, all 50 states, right?
You know, it's funny. So, on a side note, when I started in this industry in 1990, I was hired by this company, and they showed me this diagram. And as the financial advisor, you're like the quarterback, and you work with all these different experts to help whatever the client needs. And I was all excited as a new college grad. This sounds like it'd be a great place to work. Well, then after a couple of weeks, I realized that none of those people existed. Those
You were supposed to go find them.
Yeah, there were no experts to go rely upon, and it's just so wonderful that here at Allworth we're able to have.
So the advisor identifies a situation, then brings it back to a team and says, "This is what I think," and then you guys dig in.
Correct.
Okay.
So if it's a client that, it's like, this has got some hair on it, would you guys take a look and see what you can do? So this is one of those cases where there are so many interweaving parts. And so you might look at it on its surface and say, oh, this looks a little straightforward. But then when you start to dig into it, it's like, oh my gosh, there are these repercussions and knock-on effects depending on how you handle this. So let's dig into the case. We're going to call them Jim and Karen. Okay, Jim and Karen, they're in their early 60s. They live in California. They recently retired. They actually have pretty low expenses. They live within their means. They did really well saving in Roth IRAs. So they've got a couple million in Roth. They've got about $1 million in IRA assets, or $2 million, and they've got $1 million in just taxable brokerage. And so something that we see quite often, and this might be the case for people listening, is that these clients felt that they were very well diversified. They were do-it-yourselfers up until this point, and they got to the point of retiring and thought, you know what? We need to have a professional take a look at this and make sure we're doing this right. Well, within all of these accounts, first of all, so there were multiple issues to take a look at, but the first one was something we call asset location. So within these accounts, they had a bunch of ETFs, a bunch of muni bonds, some corporate bonds, and what they didn't realize is that within these ETFs, they owned, S&P 500 ETF and the NASDAQ ETF and then a large cap growth ETF. And we find this often with do-it-yourselfers because what are they using to determine what ETFs to go into? They're looking at historical performance, right? They're looking over the past 1, 3, 5 years. And when you do that, you're naturally leaning toward companies and funds that have outperformed, but now the valuations are a little stretched. And when you look,
those same funds that follow subsequent 5 years are rarely going to be the top performers going forward.
Yes. If you look back at the past decades of who, was on top of the market as far as the top 10 companies, they're completely different every decade. A decade ago, it was GE and all the oil companies. And today, of course, it's the Googles and the Nvidias of the world. Well, also the secondary problem is that all of these funds, when you look under the hood at the underlying holdings, what do you find? They're basically holding the same stuff. So you think you're well diversified because you own all of these ETFs, but in reality, they all own the same top 10 stocks, right? So when we pulled all of this apart, what we realized is they had 35% invested in just 8 stocks underneath the hood. And I'm sure you can guess what those 8 stocks were, right? They were the huge tech stocks, the Amazons, Apples, Microsoft, Nvidia,
Magnificent
those
Seven.
kinds. Yes, exactly.
So Vicky, just as a point of reference, we have $4 million, right?
We have $5 million.
$5 million, right? And they have 35% or $1.7 million invested in 8 stocks.
Well, they didn't have 100% of their money in equities. So
Okay.
the portion they had in equities
Got it.
was over concentrated in these top stocks, but
Okay.
they didn't realize that because they thought, oh, we own all these ETFs. Well, these ETFs all hold the same stuff. And not only that, all that stuff, those 8 stocks that comprise the majority of the equities, are all correlated in the same industry. So you have not only concentration
right.
risk in the stocks,
That's
but
exactly
in the industry
right.
as well. So that was enlightening to them to be able to pull back, the hood on that and actually look at the underlying holdings. But here's the other really interesting thing, that it makes sense on the surface, but then when you dig into somebody's specific situation, you think, oh, well, that's actually not the best way to do this. Okay, they actually happen to have very low taxable income because they were very frugal, right? And so when you looked at their effective tax rate combined between federal and state, it was 13%. Well, they're holding muni bond funds, California muni bonds, in their taxable account, and they're yielding 3%.
Better after Treasury bills.
Exactly. So we said, what would be better is actually if you hold Treasury bonds that are yielding 4.5%, and you pay the federal tax, they're still state income tax free, and your after tax higher than holding these municipal bonds.
And put them in the IRAs and put the capital gains stuff in the brokerage. That's where you're going to go with this, correct?
Yes, asset location is so important because what you have to understand is all these things are taxed differently. So they had some stocks that they owned inside of their IRAs that were qualified dividends, and then in their taxable brokerage, non-qualified dividends. And these aren't things that, people typically think about. They just invest, and then they get their tax bill at the end of the day, and they think that's what they got to pay. But there is so much more that's under your control, where we can put the not tax-efficient assets in the IRAs, the tax-efficient ones in the taxable brokerage, and the ones that are more aggressive, that are going to grow the most over time, in the Roths, because that's where your tax-free money comes in.
Yeah, because if you think of if you think about, say, qualified dividends, which we don't really talk that much about on this program, but for a married couple, they could have over $100,000 in qualified dividends that aren't taxed.
Right.
If that's the only source of income, which isn't. But I mean, that's why this planning makes so much sense. Because once you go over that number, it hits 15% tax. So
that's right. It's just capital gains tax brackets.
And if you have it inside your IRA, you don't get that tax break.
No, you're just wasting it. Right. So it's really important to make sure you know why you hold what you own and where you own it.
So what did you end up doing with the brokerage account?
So what we ended up doing is we reallocated.
You don't want to pay too much taxes on having to.
Yeah. Well, because their income was so low, we were able to do a few things. First of all, look at their actual, cash flow of what they needed to get them in their proper risk tolerance. Because honestly, they were too invested in fixed income. They didn't need to be as invested as they were in fixed income because their cash flow needs were very low. So the way that we like to do this is we bucket it. So the first 5 years of income you think you're going to need, that's more moderate conservative. The next 5 years we invest moderately. And anything you're not going to need for 10 plus years, we can go more moderate aggressive with, right? So we're looking across the spectrum to figure out your overall risk tolerance. And it turned out, hey, we can actually invest more in equities. And also, you're underrepresented in a lot of spaces in the equity market. You're overexposed to large cap growth. So we reallocated to create true diversity around industry, sector, cap weighting. all of that. And then we made sure that they owned the right things and the right kinds of accounts to maximize their tax picture as far as qualified dividends, treasury bonds, et cetera. And then we were able to pinpoint exactly where those cash flows should come out of to maximize their taxes, even leaving a little bit of room to do some Roth conversions that were very effective, even though they didn't have, they had $2 million in IRAs. So we're thinking through to the future of RMDs. How is that going to impact you? How can we stay underneath IRMAA brackets? Is that worth doing? Because we don't want the IRMAA tail to wag the tax dog. These are all things that we do a deep dive into to figure out what is the best way to structure this overall, not just for the next year, but for the next 15, 20 years, the rest of your life, to make sure that over your lifespan, your plan is not only adapting to the changes that inevitably happen in the tax law and the geopolitical picture. I mean, we all are experiencing that right now, but also adapts to just your life. And those are all the things that a lot of do-it-yourselfers don't necessarily think about. Some of them are really good at it, and kudos to you if you just dig in there and learn all you can. But this is what we do day in and day out. It's so important and makes a huge difference in the portfolio over the lifespan of that portfolio, what they have left.
So, Vicki, I have two questions for you. One, could you quantify in dollar numbers out the 20 years had they continued on the same path versus instituting your methodology, what the tax savings or dollar savings would be to them, right? I'm sure it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. That's my first question, so that you could quantify that this is the value to you by doing these changes. And then the second question is, what drove them to seek out a financial advisor after so many years of doing it themselves? Because oftentimes, look, I have friends that they're like, oh, I do it myself. I don't really need an advisor. And I said, well, I'll just meet with one and see what they have to say. And then they come back and they're like, well, this is great. This makes tons of sense. But then it leads to the second question, which is, I love the information and I love what you're doing, but I don't know if I want to pay for it because it's hard to quantify the value.
And it's expensive.
So it just, when she was going through this and I'm thinking about it, I got a prescription the other day and it was $963 for a month, right?
Wow.
And so because it's the beginning of the year, I haven't met my deductible, so it's out of pocket. And I thought, is this a lot or is this a little? That's what I thought to myself. And then I thought, well, this is a little relative that my doctor said I would die if I don't have this, right? So it comes down to value, and I think that, quite frankly, I'm worth $963 a month.
Not much more. It was $2,000 or something. We're going to take our chances.
My wife's like, we can't afford it. You're out. So is there a way you could quantify it? And what drove them to actually visit with you in the first place? Like, why now?
Yes. Well, on the first question, quantifying it, yes, we can to an extent. Of course, we can't guarantee anything because we can't tell the future. But as far as just rearranging things, doing some Roth conversions to bring their RMD down, but also taking into consideration that we were able to decrease their risk and increase their expected return at the same time because they were overweight in bonds, but then they were overweight in a concentrated bunch of positions too without realizing it.
Yeah, and holding munis at their tax bracket is just kind of a no-brainer.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
That's a little insulting.
Well, I mean, you don't know what you don't know.
Well, that's true. It's for a professional. It's a no-brainer.
And they might have thought, "This is how we keep our income lower by owning munis."
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Like, munis. But in their case, it didn't make sense to hold munis. So, yeah, I mean, we're looking at 6 figures of difference by making these changes. And then when you compare that to the fee that you're paying, which varies
not six
anywhere
figures.
from not 6 figures. I mean, we're also factoring in that not only were we able to increase your expected after-tax return and lower your risk at the same time and give you some peace of mind, and then at the end of your lifespan, your kids have more that they can inherit than they would have before. And when you net out the fee, they're still coming out, what we're expecting, I can't guarantee anything, of course, is that they're coming out so much farther ahead by having somebody come alongside them and be on their side to help them determine the best way to structure all of this. It's
very dynamic because every
year it changes.
Yeah, of course.
Every year and even multiple times during the year you're checking in to see, are these assumptions still correct? Do we need to make adjustments? If they're, we're being proactive with the clients and their changes as well. So it more than pays for itself, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
And this isn't just Allworth that provides this.
That's right.
This type, but there are many firms.
Good quality firms.
Good quality firms. And so tell us what you believe drove them to decide to seek out an advisor at this stage of their life. Was it just that they realized this account is quite large, or that they were struggling with managing it, or just didn't feel right? There
were two things. First was the big life change that they decided to, they were both then retired. So they're in their early 60s and retired. Part of their question was, when should we take Social Security? So they were looking at that. And then the other question was, boy, the stock market sure seems high. And we just picked these ETFs because that's what everybody invests in, right? The S&P and the NASDAQ, and you call it a day. But we're starting to get a little bit nervous about these valuations, and we're not quite sure how to look at this or even think about it. So those were really the three driving forces. And really, I think they did come in thinking, we're just going to sit down for an hour and get some ideas, and then we'll just go on our merry way. But once we were able to actually show, well, in reality, you have all of these incredible opportunities in your portfolio to make a huge difference, the light bulb moment really happened.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, good. I appreciate you sharing the story, Vicki. I know this is the kind of thing that happens on a daily basis at Allworth, really, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
There are
That's right.
thousands of clients. So.
All right. Thanks, Vicki. Appreciate you being on.
Yep.
Thank you.